Between 2004 and 2009, across the neighboring Indian states of Karnataka and Kerala, multiple women were found dead in bus station bathrooms. They carried no identification, there were no witnesses, and each body had froth around the mouth, a detail quietly recorded in police reports. Authorities treated every case the same, an unnatural death, possibly self-inflicted. Each woman was buried or cremated as unidentified, and the cases were closed. Over a dozen women died this way, yet no one sounded the alarm. How could that happen? The victims were discovered in different districts, different stations, and filed under separate case reports. No one noticed the pattern, and that's why, over 6 years, 20 women were killed in exactly the same manner. If you want, I can also make an even punchier, 2 to 3 sentence version that's perfect for a YouTube video intro. Do you want me to do that?
And the exact same man was responsible for every one of them. This is the case of Cyanide Mohan. June 17th, 2009, a village called Barimaru in the state of Karnataka. A 22-year-old woman named Anitha Bangeira left home without telling anyone where she was going. She took the gold jewelry her brother Madhav gifted her, some cash, an expensive cell phone, and her finest clothes. She said nothing. She left no note. When her family realized she was gone, her father, Dugapa Mulya, went straight to the police station to file a missing persons report. The police were dismissive, telling him it was probably a case of love jihad. This was a prominent conspiracy theory in coastal Karnataka at the time. The idea was that Muslim men would deliberately seduce Hindu women in an attempt to convert them to Islam. The officer suggested that Anitha had simply run away with a Muslim man, and they told the family to keep quiet and not make trouble. The police asked us to keep our mouths shut, Dugapa would later say. They were not willing to listen, despite no one having seen Anitha talking to any person of another community. Fortunately, Anitha's community refused to accept that answer. They began staging protests at the police station. The pressure building until officers were facing a genuine threat of violence if they didn't act. And so, driven not by institutional protocol, but by the force of communal pressure, investigators finally formed a proper investigative team. And what they found when they eventually began looking changed everything. The day after Anitha disappeared, June 18, 2009, roughly 140 kilometers away at the Hassan bus station, a woman in a wedding sari had been found dead in a public bathroom. Local police had assumed she was an unidentified vagrant. They recorded the death as unnatural and buried her without making any attempt at identification. It took investigators roughly 20 days from the start of the inquiry to connect that buried woman to Anitha's missing persons report, to exhume the body, to conduct an autopsy, and to finally understand what they were dealing with. The toxicology result came back clear: cyanide poisoning. This was murder. The corps of detectives, Karnataka's premier investigative agency, were brought in. They began pulling Anitha's phone records. One number kept appearing in her call history, registered to a man named Sridhar from the district of Madikeri. When investigators tracked Sridhar down, he told them the number wasn't his at all. It belonged to his sister, Kaveri, who had been working across the state border in Kasaragod, Kerala. Kaveri, it turned out, had also been missing since early 2009. Her body, investigators learned, had reportedly already been found at a different bus station. She had also been classified as an unidentified person, and her body was disposed of without any investigation. The man responsible for her death had been using Kaveri's phone to contact Anitha. Investigators pulled more records, more names surfaced. Vinutha from Puttur, Pushpa from Kasaragod. A chain of women who had never met each other, all of whom had been in contact with the owner of this number. all of them last seen in the company of a man, using a different name each time. At first, the investigators assumed they were looking at a human trafficking ring. But then they began cross-referencing, checking missing persons reports against unidentified female bodies found in bus station bathrooms across the state. Deaths recorded as pesticide poisoning, filed as probably self-inflicted, closed without further inquiry. They realized that these women had not been moved anywhere. They had been killed one at a time across jurisdictions over a period of several years, and every thread led back to the same man. The break in the case came through the phones. After killing Anitha, the man had discarded the SIM card, but handed her handset to his nephew as a gift. And the boy put his own SIM into it and started using it. Why wouldn't he? He had no indication as to its grisly origins. But thanks to the man's short-sighted decision, detectives were able to trace the device, which led them to the nephew. He told them his uncle had given him the phone. His uncle's name, Mohan Kumar. A search conducted at the home of Mohan's wife Sridevi turned up 8 cyanide tablets, 4 mobile phones, jewelry that was later identified as belonging to Anitha, and a collection of counterfeit government seals and official letterheads made out in various names. These counterfeit tools were what Mohan had been using to present himself as a senior government official, giving every woman he approached a reason to trust him. To make the arrest, investigators needed a way to draw him out. They found it through a woman named Sumitra, who had seen Anitha board a bus toward Hassan with a man shortly before she disappeared. Sumitra also knew Mohan Kumar personally. Some years before, he had approached her with a marriage proposal, presenting himself as a plantation supervisor. She had turned him down. The police asked her to call him and arrange a meeting, and she agreed. October 21st, 2009, at a bus station in Bantwal, Karnataka state. Mohan arrived at the meeting point where the police were waiting for him, and he was immediately taken into custody. Under interrogation, he confessed to killing 20 women across the states of Karnataka and Kerala. Investigators who were present later described how he recalled the physical appearance of each victim and the locations of their bodies with a level of composed, detailed precision that left them feeling deeply unsettled. So who was this man, and how had he managed to pull off the same crime 20 times? Mohan Kumar Vivekanand was born on April 6, 1963 in Kanyana, Dakshina Kannada district. His mother was a domestic helper, raising 7 children alone as their father abandoned the family when Mohan was still young. Mohan dropped out of school in the 7th grade, but later returned to his studies, securing work as an elementary school PE teacher, a position he held from 1980 to 2003. He was a man with a government job, a stable salary. Nothing from the outside attracted suspicion, but it should have. At the time of his arrest, Mohan was 46 and had married 3 times. He split his time living between 2 households, one with his second wife, Manjula, who had 2 daughters, and another with his third wife, Sridevi, who had 2 sons. Neither woman knew the other existed. Both believed he was a teacher on a government posting that required time away from home, an explanation that explained his absences and discouraged questions. The first recorded sign of the kind of man Mohan was came in 2003, the same year his teaching career ended. He was arrested in Dharmasthala, a Hindu pilgrimage town on the banks of the Netravati River, after he tried to throw a woman from a bridge into the fast-moving water below. Hearing the woman's screams, bystanders came to her rescue, beating Mohan and handing him over to the police. He was charged with attempted murder, but later acquitted due to a lack of evidence. Investigators who later reviewed the case believed that this was the turning point, the moment Mohan understood that he could commit crimes against women and the system would not hold him accountable for it.
His first confirmed murder occurred in 2004. Mohan had a very specific target, unmarried women from modest backgrounds, usually in their mid-20s or older, whose families struggled to arrange a proper dowry for marriage. He would seek them out in public spaces, bus stations, temples, and markets, and approach them using an alias carefully chosen to match their caste, a calculated detail that instantly gained their trust.
He would present himself as a senior government official, stable, respected, and then he would say that one thing that transformed the entire dynamic. "I don't need a dowry, I just want a wife." Those two sentences were dreamlike to those facing dowry pressure in coastal Karnataka. A family unable to pay an adequate dowry carried serious social shame. In those circles, a daughter who reaches their mid-20s without a marriage prospect is often seen as a problem, as a source of quiet, persistent embarrassment for everyone around her. Neighbors notice, other families notice, and the weight of it accumulates over the years. For a woman in that position, a man who said he would marry her without asking for what her family couldn't afford was the answer to years of worry. Mohan would spend weeks building trust. Then he would convince the woman to elope with him. It was framed as a practical solution, a way to skip formalities that made everything so complicated. He would take the woman to an inexpensive lodge in a different town and tell her they would be married at a temple the following morning. The next morning, at the bus station, he would hand her a small pill and tell her it was a contraceptive. The woman would go into the bathroom to take it, as he had instructed, and she would not come back out. Symptoms of cyanide poisoning escalate within minutes. Confusion, collapse, cardiac arrest. Death comes fast. There is little noise. There is no struggle with an assailant. Local police would find a woman in a bus station bathroom. No identification, no witnesses to any foul play, froth around the mouth, and it would be noted in the report, and the case would be closed. And that is how Mohan succeeded for so long. He rotated names, rotated phones, rotated districts. He had built his entire method around a system that was not designed to search across borders. Anita Banguera had only been educated until the 7th grade. To make a living, she made small hand-rolled cigarettes at home. It paid almost nothing. For her wedding fund, Anita's family had set aside roughly 72 grams of gold and 5,000 rupees, which is around $55 US in cash, money they had borrowed and were still repaying at the time of her death. Her brother Madhav had given her an expensive mobile phone, a genuine luxury in that household. When she left that morning, she took all of it, the gold, the cash, the phone, and her best clothes. She believed she was starting a new life. Her family never saw her body. She had been buried before they even found out she was dead. We saw his smirk on TV whenever he was brought to court, her father would say years later. But we were not witnesses, nor did the police ask us to come to court. Our only regret is that we could not see Anita one last time.
Pushpavati Akra, 22, was another victim of Mohan Kumar. After leaving home for the temple one morning, she never returned. Her death devastated her family. Her mother suffered a stroke, and her sisters faced social stigma, unable to marry for years. Building a case against Mohan was challenging. Investigators relied on circumstantial evidence. Lodge staff saw him arrive with women and leave alone. Loan records showed he pawned their jewelry, and a chemical dealer confirmed he sold Mohan cyanide. A diary Mohan kept listed victims and survivors. The key breakthrough came from a survivor who escaped his method, was traced through call records, and testified in a closed courtroom. Mohan represented himself, showed no remorse, and was convicted for multiple murders. By 2020, he had been convicted in all 20 cases. Some death sentences were later commuted to life imprisonment, but he remains in prison awaiting execution. This case exposed systemic failures. Missing person reports were mishandled, women were left vulnerable, and 20 lives were lost. What ultimately brought Mohan down was a combination of small mistakes, a courageous survivor, and a community that refused to let authorities look away.